Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Ferguson. I'm the front-end developer lead of the themes team at Shopify. I'm joined today by David Cornu, senior developer lead of the online store channel. All right, today we're going to be talking about theme development. More specifically, we're going to be talking about some new tools we've launched for the editor and some that are upcoming. And we're going to be talking about some improvements that have been made in Liquid that will make customizing themes easier. And I just want to take a moment to remind everyone that you can start asking your questions now through the app using the QA code YYZ. So you'll be able to submit those throughout the talk, and at the end, we'll take an iPad and answer questions you've submitted. So, last year in Unite, we announced a new way of building storefronts using sections. And by October of that year, we launched a new editor, as well as a new starter theme called Debut that came with a wide range of section types. And in just 4 months, February of this year, every theme in the theme store was using sections. And today, there are 45 unique themes powered by sections. In terms of merchant adoption, as Satish mentioned this morning, the vast majority of customizations being done in the editor today are being done on section themes. And partners have been using sections to give their clients more control over their site's content and its layout. This is a clean theme. This is Expression theme by Clean Themes. And here they have a static sidebar where they let their merchant customize their own sidebar from a variety of block types. And of course, reorder the sections, the blocks as they see fit. Another example, so the JavaScript API makes customizing themes for partners and merchants a better experience. This is a trademark theme by Maestro, who's in the audience today, I see. So they have their own custom scripts that's able to hook into editor events, which make sure that the appropriate content is always brought into focus. So the new editor and sections have made customizing themes a much better experience for partners and merchants, but this just isn't for themes in the theme store. Shopify Plus merchants and Shopify Plus partners and Shopify partners have been using sections in creative ways for their clients since its release. And I'd like to give an example today from Seed CMS, a Shopify Plus partner. So this merchant is called Kalo. It's based here in California. And they have a page that's promoting a product called Stackables that lets you design your own silicone ring. Seed CMS is using a static section to give their merchant the control of what feature combination is shown on that template. And they're using another static section to let their merchant control what related collections and related products get shown alongside it. So sections and the JavaScript API represent vast improvements in customizing themes. But we've continued to ship some improvements that will make building themes for this new editor a much better experience.
To start with, let's go over some recent additions to our setting types. These provide for richer interactions in the editor and address some common issues. First, we've introduced the image picker setting. The image setting it replaces ties files to a specific theme and setting, which means that they are lost when they're changed and must be manually copied when switching to another theme. Image Picker addresses both of these concerns by letting the merchants upload these images to the shop's library and letting them choose from this library when configuring the setting. Second, we've given themes a way to let users select a specific blog post using the article setting type. It works the same way as the page or product settings and can be used in conjunctions with the article's global variable. This can be particularly useful to show relevant content in meganavs or for featured article sections, as illustrated here. Much like the product setting, users can select any post across all of their blogs. Third, after noticing a common pattern of using text inputs for video URLs across many themes, we've introduced the video URL setting type to standardize this. It supports both YouTube and Vimeo and validates the input against well-known URL patterns from both these providers. We also provide a few conveniences for accessing these settings from Liquid. Yes. Sorry, that took a while to switch. So while the bare setting will give you access to the full URL, you can also get access to the type and the normalized video ID should you want to customize the experience using the YouTube or Vimeo JavaScript SDKs. And continuing on the theme of standardizing common patterns, the last new setting type we'll cover today is HTML. There are plenty of reasons, such as embed codes, why you'd want to give merchant the ability to inject HTML. However, doing this with a text area setting may lead to a broken layout if the value contains malformed markup. To prevent this, the HTML setting ensures that its value is valid. Next, let's cover some improvements to our existing features, starting with fonts. Our original solution to font selection was the font setting type, which lets merchants pick from a fixed list of web-safe fonts. In practice, however, new browser features such as web fonts have made a much broader selection available. To get around this limitation, many themes, including our own, use a select setting type combined with some custom liquid logic to provide some of Google's fonts. This workaround has allowed us to deliver some great experiences. For instance, the colors theme showcased here uses the Montserrat font from Google Fonts to great effect. However, relying on custom solutions has a few limitations. While Google Fonts makes some great fonts available, each theme includes its own subset, which means merchant selection varies between themes. And while we could have simply standardized a selection of Google fonts, we decided to take this one step further. To that end, we've partnered with Monotype, one of the most well-known foundries, to make some of their fonts, such as Helvetica or Neue Haas Unica, available in every Shopify storefront. We'll be giving merchants access to over 150 fonts from Monotype's library, in addition to a selection of Google fonts. These will be available for free and automatically loading based on the theme setting. And fonts will be available this summer.
So David has talked about a couple of improvements to the editor we've made. We've also made some improvements of what you can do with Liquid that's going to make coding these themes and theme features a lot easier as well. And to start, nailed it. All right, to start, let's talk about images. So images strongly influence the buying experience. These massive full-screen images are immersive and can bring the buyer into your brand. High-resolution photos allow you to zoom in on your product's best-selling features. However, such massive imagery comes at a cost. Large file sizes take time to download. Watching a page render in front of you takes you out of that experience. And we all know that every second that goes by increases the likelihood of abandoned cart. So let's talk about responsive images. And for those unfamiliar, responsive image is the idea of loading the appropriate image for its intended display. If I compare shopping on a tablet and a mobile phone, on my mobile phone, the image I see can be a much smaller file size to look just as crisp as that of the tablet, and a smaller file size should be downloaded faster over the exact same connection. How you might implement responsive imageries is a common source set implementation. And if you're unfamiliar, what this is doing is we're giving the browser information about our images and their widths and the intended display size, and the browser trusts that we're giving it good information, and it will make an educated decision of what image to load. So on this line here in yellow, we're saying that the image at that URL is 1,024 pixels wide. How you do this with Liquid today is you'd use the image URL filter to ask for an image that's 1,024 pixels wide. And as long as you're uploading images that meet these requested widths, everything's great. But in reality, what happens if you or your client uploads a much smaller image? I asked for one that's over 1,000 wide, but my bike image is only 800 pixels. What happens then? Well, what happens depends on your browser and CSS you have loaded already, but essentially you're going to get an image that's too small for its intended display. You're either going to see an image stretched way too big or an image brought down to an unexpected size. And the problem line is right here. Because with Shopify, we'll give you an image that's 1,024 pixels wide or the biggest one possible. And because of that biggest one possible, now the browser doesn't have accurate information. Our code doesn't know the actual image width of the image that was uploaded. That is, until now. So we've expanded the image drop to have a width, height, and aspect ratio of the original image uploaded. Now I can go back to that same code example, and I can make sure that in my code, I'm only going to be requesting URLs that meet so I'm only going to be requesting URLs where the original image is at least as big. How many different URLs you're going to include is totally up to you and your theme developer. And to get the image height, width, aspect ratio doesn't require any additional work on your end. Shopify's already run a job to update over 750 million images, so you can start implementing your own responsive image solution today. We have a theme called Narrative that's going to be released in the coming weeks, and this is a side-by-side comparison of the product page on desktop and mobile. And you can see written at the bottom that the mobile image is 1/7 the size of that is seen on desktop, and that image is still just as crisp. And the fact that you have image with aspect ratio, yes, you can implement source set, but you also have so many other opportunities. You can start using plugins or build your own that leverages these properties. Again, in Narrative, we're using a plugin, an open source plugin called Lazy Sizes that's lazily loading images and takes advantage of source set and sizes. So go back to another example of Narrative. I'm going to show a side-by-side comparison of what our demo shop looks like before, which is on the left, and after our implementation of responsive images. This is simulating loading the website over a 3G connection. And after responsive images over 3G connection, this can be done in 5.5 seconds. And prior, obviously, is almost there, takes longer. So using our demo stores for Narrative as a testing ground and looking at the homepage, on average, we're seeing a decrease in page render time of 50%. And for handheld devices, we're seeing an initial page weight drop of 85%. And the reason this number is so high is because we're now lazily loading in images. We're only going to be requesting images to download if the customer is actually going to see it. And as you've seen this morning, not the vast majority, but the majority now of browsing and purchases is being done on mobile phones. And we need to be optimizing for these smaller screen devices.
Next, let's talk about navigation. Theme developers should be familiar with this snippet of Liquid, using the title from the previous link, passing it to the handle filter, and using it to obtain the drop-down menu. And merchants wanting to create a drop-down menu will have many encounters with this particular docs page. Point 3 is perhaps the hairiest, and let's unpack what's involved. After I've installed the label theme from the theme store, I'd like to create a drop-down to give my customers quick access to my most popular guides. To do so, I would first have to add my top-level items to my main menu, taking note of the name I gave to the item I wish to add a drop-down to, in this case, guides. I then have to create an entirely different menu using that name as a handle and add my drop-down items to it. This process is difficult to understand and means a single logical menu has to be edited in multiple places. To address these issues, we're introducing nested navigation. Merchants will now be able to create menus with up to 3 levels of nesting from a single page using a drag-and-drop interface. We've also made it a lot easier to render nested menus in Liquid. The link drop now has a links attribute that returns its children. Both the link and link list drop have a levels attribute that exposes the number of levels nested below them. And in addition to the link active attribute, we've now added a link.childActive attribute to let you know if any of the nested items point to the current page. The good news is the new interface is backwards compatible with the current markup I showed you a bit earlier, and will be available to merchants before we start requiring themes to use the updated Liquid. And nested navigation will also be available this summer, but in the coming weeks, we will be making a beta available to partners to try it on development shops. We want you to try out the updated interface and markup on your themes, and look forward to your feedback.
So images and nested navigation are definitely the heavy hitters when it comes to Liquid improvements. But there's been a couple other smaller but noteworthy ones I'd like to jump through today. And the first being the product option drop, which you may have seen. So the product option drop makes more information about your product options available to Liquid, which is going to help with your initial page render. So if I look at a typical product page, you can see this wheel set has 2 product options. Color is using a button select for the variant selection, and size is using more traditional drop-down select. In the past, to get this custom variant selection required one of 2 approaches. Either you're going to use a heavy Liquid-based one that's going to use conditional logic to tease out all your product options and create that HTML, or more likely, you're going to use a JavaScript method that's going to look at the JSON response and dynamically generate the HTML and then shove it into the page. Neither of these are ideal. And with the more common JavaScript one, there's 2 main drawbacks. One is that JavaScript takes time to download and execute. And 2, you also run the risk of competing with other third-party apps or third-party scripts that are also trying to control the layout to their own means. Come on. There. But so now we have the product options with values, and it's been recently expanded to have these 4 properties: the name, position, values of that product option, and the selected value. So looking at this color option from before, I can use option.name to look specifically for color, so I can control the HTML regardless of where that product option shows up in the array. I can iterate over all the color values with option.values. Selected value will let me check that value if I have a variant selected already. You can do other things, like here I'm attaching the option position to a data attribute because I want to pass some extra information to my custom scripts. Something else that got some much needed attention is the template drop. For one, it's actually a drop now. It's not just a string. And the template drop is going to tell you the directory the template's in, its base name, and the suffix it's using. Because in the past, if you want to do something like this, to just load certain assets if you're in a template in the customs directory, you had to look for the presence of a substring. But now you can just reference template.directory directly. Same thing about just finding out information about your template. You had to do some creative string to array manipulation, but you can just reference their properties again directly. And there's been a number of other Liquid updates, like color filters. There's additional ones for Liquid. There's a new request drop. There's more crop options for image URL, and we've added a reorder event to the JavaScript API based on partner feedback. With all these Liquid updates, it begs this question. Like, what can we do to help the partner community stay informed of all these updates? We have a partners team that publishes blog posts, streams webinars, hosts meetups. We have a documentation team that works with content strategists to keep our public sites up to date. But with communication and education, it always takes multiple channels. So we've added our own as theme and online store developers. That's called Slate. So Slate is a theme scaffolding and command line tool for Shopify themes. The primary goal of Slate is to assist you with Shopify theme development and deployment. Starting your next project should be as simple as typing Slate theme new. And typing that into terminal was going to create a project for you with certain theme scaffolding and a number of helper scripts. That project will look a lot like this. The templates and the CSS are intentionally bare bones. So this unopinionated approach allows Slate to be your starting point for your next project, regardless of your theme's intended design or intended functionality. The templates we generate will make a functioning Shopify theme, but it's just to be meant as a starting point. So you get a variety of helpers because a goal of Slate is to address a lot of Shopify-specific concerns. And we have a number of scripts, and I'm going to show how we would use a couple of those today. Starting with variant.js. So a Shopify-specific concern, how do I handle variant selection, and how do I make sure the right information is being displayed to buyers? We're going to look at a video of a common product page interaction. Changing one product option is going to change some information. The image changes, the availability changes. Changing another product option changes some pricing information. Now this is on sale. So this is a very common interaction, but the JavaScript can be quite complex. So here's how Slate handles that. I'm going to create a new object with Slate variants, and I'm going to pass it an options object. Again, Slate knows nothing about your theme, and that's what lets it be a starting point for any project. So we're going to have to tell Slate a little bit about the markup of our page. Once I've created that object, I get access to a number of custom events, being variant change, and also some more specific ones, like when the variant image should change, and also when the variant pricing information should change. I just write my own. It's up to you to write your own callbacks for this event listener. So on the page we saw before, I might have my own custom function called update product prices that I want called whenever the variant's on sale, or whenever the pricing information changes. So I'm going to listen to the variant price change event, and I'm going to have it run for the callback my own function called update product prices. You might have seen that even in my own custom function, I'm using another Slate helper. It's from currency.js. It's called format money. And again, a Shopify-specific concern is the fact that merchants can have multiple currency formats, and this will help respect those currency formats that the merchant has set. We talked about the editor, and we showed some interactions. And so Slate has some helper functions to help with sections and creating your own custom JavaScript for the editor. So again, this is narrative. And we're going to look at a featured slider. So going in there in the mobile view, if I go down and I choose one of the blocks that represents the slides, two things happen. One, my slider opens up, and it makes sure we go to that block, we go to that slide. And if I deselect that block, some other events will happen, like my slider is going to close. So how would Slate help with that? Similar to what we saw with Variant.js, I'm going to make a new object using Slate sections. And again, Slate doesn't know anything about your theme. I'm going to tell Slate the different sections that I'm using with the register function. I just need to tell it one selector and the constructor I've made for that section. Once I've registered that section, it's going to have a number of methods attached to it. So on select, on a section select, on a block select or deselect, what you need to do now is I just say, hey, Slate, this is my function that I want you to run every time you do a block select. So from that featured slider we saw, if you're in the mobile view, first thing I want you to do is open the cover, and then we're going to go to that block. And if I wasn't in mobile view, we're just going to make sure we scroll the right slide into position. And Slate will make sure that this custom function is run every time a block select event happens. Let's take a quick break from code. At Shopify, we have this statement to make commerce better for everyone. So better for buyers, better for merchants, better for developers, and better for partners. And when we start talking about making the web better for everyone, we start talking about web accessibility. Another goal of Slate is to help with web development in general. We've built Ally.js to help web developers make accessible themes. So I'm going to show some product selection again, but this time just using the keyboard navigation. When I add an item to cart, I have a cart drawer slide out from the side. This is obvious to a sighted user, but if you're not a sighted user, how do you make sure that you're aware that this action has happened? Well, we have a method called trap focus. And again, Slate doesn't know about your theme, so we're just going to tell it what new element we want to shift focus to shift the keyboard focus to. And of course, we have a remove trap focus to take it off when you want to shift it away. Accessibility isn't just about JavaScript. The content of your site, that is the HTML and the CSS, needs to be accessible as well. So if we look at this product page again, we can see that we have some pricing information. But how is a screen reader supposed to interpret this? Do the boots cost $120, or do they cost $150? How would a non-sighted user or its assistive technology know the real price? If we look at the markup of this theme, if it was built with Slate, there would be a class called visually hidden. Slate ships with very few CSS classes, but the ones it does ship with serve a specific purpose. The visually hidden class makes sure that that element is going to be hidden from sighted users, but still accessible to a screen reader. Because in case you didn't know, simply putting display none on an element will hide it from a sighted user, but it's also going to hide it from assistive technology. So a goal of Slate is to help with development and deployment. That's getting the code from your local machine onto the Shopify hosted site. So every Slate project ships with something called Slate Tools. It's a separate node package. Under the hood, it's running ThemeKit and a number of gulp commands. And so this is here to help you deploy your code to a number of different environments, but also a number of different stores. You might have your own development store for your own working, and then your clients, the production store. ThemeKit and Slate Tools will help deploy code to both those environments. And you can go to the public site to find out more about the deploy, build, and watch commands. So Slate was developed internally by the themes team, but we're very happy to be sharing it with the partner community. But the future of Slate's development is going to depend on the feedback we get. So we really want you to go to the public site, install it on your local machine, and use Slate in your next project, and let us know in the open repos how that process was.
All of the changes that we've discussed today have been reflected in our Liquid documentation, so you can find a description of those there. However, the Slate website is new. It's been around for about a month, so definitely look into that if you want more coverage of what Nathan discussed and some additional features of Slate. We are also available for office hours today, well, the end of today and tomorrow, so you can book us in the app. And that's it for our talk. We'll be now taking audience and app questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All
you want to read?
Yo, I'll read it.
Okay.
All right, so I have a question from Brian. Can I add sections of product pages, articles, and collections? Yes, with an asterisk. So if you've messed around. So if you've been developing with sections, you would know that the homepage supports dynamic sections. You can put sections on additional templates. For example, even in Debut, you could check right now, its collection page and product page, they're all using static sections. So when I showed the example from the expression theme, from Clean Themes, they're using a static section for that sidebar. That sidebar is going to be loaded on well, it's probably likely in theme.liquid. But for product.liquid, you could have a static section that you can see with Debut right now to show how to pass section settings to any product using that template. And that's an important distinction, is that sections are tied to the template, not the resource. But you can definitely use it. I think really good use cases of static sections on things like product pages and collections is what I showed with Kalo, where you have a dedicated page for one specific purpose, and it can have its own more custom settings. Otherwise, if you're using static sections on a product page, just know that those will affect every product using that template. All right. Will sections be available in individual products? Yep, like the same way I described before. Does Slate provide any code to assist with color swatches for variants? So this is Brian again. Color swatches for variants, so that might have been addressed when I was talking about you now have product options with values, so you can start teasing apart your product options and having custom markup for swatches. So the initial swatches rendering is just the HTML. With Slate, again, how I said when we made Slate variants and we pass an options object, we just need to tell Slate a couple things like the selectors, and it's going to be able to figure it out. Like tell Slate what our product options are. So it'll work with the example project will use select drop-downs, but it works with radio buttons. It works with any inputs. So getting the actual color swatch is just HTML. Slate will be able to handle the variant switching as long as you're telling it the proper information about your theme. Links in a rich text setting?
What was the full question?
It just says that. Links in a rich text setting, type.
Links in a rich text setting type. Oh, in the, so like in section?
Yeah, like theme editor, RTE.
Yeah, that's coming soon.
Anonymous, does that answer your question? Soon?
Yep, soon.
Yeah. Josh Highland, responsive images are great. Will you make this available for image uploads via theme settings or just products? So the image properties I showed today are not unique to products. That's available on any image. And again, it's up to you how you want to implement responsive images, whether like a straightforward source set implementation or if you want to use another plugin, but that's just the image drop in general that those properties are available for. And if I don't answer your question, just like rush the stage and stop me. All right, navigation updates. Will there be an API release so I can make nav changes outside of the admin UI?
We're working on it.
Okay. Is Variant.js like the option selector? How do they differ? So I'm assuming the option selector here is talking about this thing called option selection JS. And if you've been developing Shopify themes for a little while, you would know that option selection JS was a globally hosted asset that Shopify had. And the problem with option selection JS is that it just got really old and it was way too opinionated. Something that came up with the Timber theme during our office hours, they said, hey, you got rid of Timber. I said, no, I haven't deleted the repo. But the problem with Timber is that it got too far out of pace of what we want to be providing the partners to help them along. The common criticism we got, I swear I'll get back to this question, but the common criticism we got of Timber is it looked like a Timber theme. They spent way too much effort just tearing apart the stuff they didn't want. So same thing with Variant.js. It knows nothing about your theme, so you just tell it that information and what functions you want to run. With option selection, it was just this understood thing that you were loading option selection and an understood thing that you would use a variable like select callback, for example, and pass your custom function. Now all of that's on you, so you can still run your custom functions and your custom callbacks. But in a way, it does replace option selection because there'd be no reason to have Variant.js and that globally hosted asset. Is there a way to create a schema setting interface that is dependent on another setting? I'm not sure what that means.
A schema setting that is dependent on another setting?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. Say for like slideshows, like if I wanted to make an auto slide and then you can set slide speeds and everything,
Yep.
I want to only see the interface to do the slide speed if I enable that checkbox.
Okay, so like kind of a conditional. If I turn this on,
yeah.
show me more.
Yes.
Yep. So we've had that. Yeah, that's something come up internally in the offices of like showing conditional settings and try to simplify these settings. But at this point, just conversations. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to do this with like one making apparent there's additional settings. So yeah, it's like a hot debate internally. Yeah. Cool. Can I create a reusable settings that do not have to copy and paste with the same JSON everywhere? Example, font selection dropdown.
So the new font setting will completely replace that. So you won't have to redefine your font selection every time. You'll just have to define a setting of type font. So that solves that copying of JSON. However, there's probably other cases where that's still happening. But if you do have like particular cases other than fonts where you're copying JSON, I'd love to hear about it. So feel free to grab me afterwards or message me on the Unite app. I'd really want to hear about that.
Well, also, we can take a question from the audience, too. Like, if you want to shoot up your hand, or again, rush the stage. Yeah. No, yeah.
You've mentioned the workarounds that many of us are already familiar with for using static sections on other resources, like products and pages. How seriously is the sort of thought going into making full sections available throughout every resource? It always seems to be a kind of, it's maybe coming one day. But to be able to do full sections on pages and blog posts and products.
Right on, yeah. And so the question was like bringing sections to these other resources, pages, products, blog posts. So attaching information to the resource is definitely something we're well aware that people are asking for, and we're talking internally how to do this. I know a shortcut is to say we'll put sections in every page. But we have to talk about, like, is that really the best way to go about it? Because if you're talking inherent to sections, these are these like block-level elements. And if I start thinking about a product page, what unique information I'd want to have related products, maybe an inventory count, maybe a countdown for certain, or a promotion attached to this. And now we're talking about like very small elements. They're being rendered in specific areas in the markup and no longer the simple, again, I said block-level element. So yes, we're definitely interested in how to attach additional information to the resource. And maybe it's sections, maybe it's something else. Cool. Hey, I saw a hand go way in the back. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, there's that long walk over there. What else do we have? Why does trap focus have a namespace? Oh yeah, so if you have seen on that slide that trap focus has a namespace, I'm assuming it means like when we take the event listener off of it, we might have multiple elements that we're trying to trap focus on, so we don't necessarily want to remove all those event listeners off of everyone. I can't go back in my slides, unfortunately. But the fact that like we have multiple elements that we might want to attach different events to, and we need to namespace them so we don't remove it off of everyone.
Hi, nested navigation is great, but I was wondering what would happen if you needed more than 3 levels. Do we have to fall back to the old technique or just use the old technique?
So there's a couple things you can do in that case. The reason we're going with 3, we basically ran like a scan across all the existing themes, and we found that 2 or 3 covers about 80 to 90% of the cases. If you want to do more complex cases, you can use the linked list setting type from within your schema. So then you can add, so you can let your, as you're configuring it, you can pick from multiple linked lists and have those go all the way to up to 3.
Cool. Any others? Yo, Maestro.
We currently have the possibility to filter collection by vendor or product type, but when we do so, we completely lose the context of the current collection, and it's a bit useless. So will we have an improvement to those filters?
For sure. And for those who are unfamiliar with what he's describing, that you can filter collection by tag, and then you can filter collection by vendor But then when you start doing that, your URL parameters are changing, and then saying you start losing the effectiveness of that. So about future of filtering, I'll say on collections, we have run experiments with merchants to figure out what better filtering looks like, and we haven't decided on a solution, but we've been experimenting. Yeah. Well aware of this, yeah. Yeah, thanks. Yes? So I have a question about what are the key factors partners should consider to have their themes accepted in the theme store. And for that, I'm going to suggest people get in contact with Kevin Shaken and his team, who's sitting here in the front. And so Kevin and Mike, with their hands raised, they're doing office hours for theme reviews, and they'll be the ones you want to talk to about the theme store. We have 4 minutes left. Any other questions? Oh, yep.
Sorry, it's a quick one. It's kind of related to the one before about filters. Will there ever be a liquid filter for query strings?
Will there ever be a liquid filter for query string?
To access the query string, like, so that you can pass attributes through the URL and then do stuff with that in the liquid.
Right on. So on my slide about more liquid changes, I talked about a new request drop that is now pulling information about the URL. However, that doesn't currently bring in the URL parameters. But hey, man, let's talk. Cool.
I believe there was a question back there, but I don't know if it was answered. Oh, way back there.
Cool. What do we have there? Right. So does that image resizing only resizes the image of the same aspect ratio? Can I control the aspect ratio as well? Right. So you have the image aspect ratio property, and that's the aspect ratio of the original image. Once you start using the crop filters, that property only points to the original image, so that you won't be able to say crop this by this dimension. What's the aspect ratio now? You're only going to get the original image. And we've been talking about crop filters more internally because crop filters currently suffers from that same thing where we're going to match your requested crop sizing or the closest or the largest we can get to. But we've been talking about crop filtering and how this rolls out to those cropped images or adjusted images internally. Yep.
Hey, so let's talk about meta fields.
Yeah.
They're kind of like the redheaded stepchild of theme development. Any plan to make them like first-class citizens, give them native UI, anything like that?
Okay, so if anyone's unfamiliar with meta fields, like they're amazing. When I worked in Plus, we used them for everything, but they're also not as rich as having first-class support or whatever term you just used in comparison to like theme editor settings. So there's not currently plans to have meta fields more exposed, which when I first heard that, like kind of bummed me out. But then I realized, like, if we just gave more exposure to meta fields, we wouldn't be addressing this larger issue, which we talked about today, of how do you start like attaching different types of information to the resource without pretending that a string field is the solution. So there's no current plans to make meta fields more available in the admin.
You got 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Oh,
it's one over there.
Maestro.
OK, this will be the last question.
Yep, sure.
Hi, guys. Speaking about meta fields, when will it be included into the search results, like taken into account into results of search?
Interesting. Do you have anything on that?
Not particularly.
No, I don't know of any talk to include meta fields in the weighting of search results. But we can talk after, yeah? Cool. All right, so we were told that'd be the last question. So thank you very much. As David said, we have office hours. We have one more session today, but we're also here tomorrow with office hours, or you could grab us when you see us around the conference. All right, thank you.
Thank you.